pay subsidies to Canada and to Mexico of hundreds of billions of dollars, and the United States will not be doing that any longer. We're not going to do it any longer.
No one wins a tariff war. And so we want to go back to looking at the agreement that we signed, the USMCA. That has served us well for a number of years. And I don't know why the president is behaving this way, because it's illegal. We're going to challenge it. And we would like to get back to negotiating some of the pressure points on that.
All right, let's get into the wild news of the day. Let's start with tariff mania in here. This is day 2 of Trump's crushing tariffs on Canada because our politicians just refuse to do their jobs or even going to work. Like the parliament is still prorogued. Day two of crushing tariffs with a recession around the corner, according to economists, and yet nobody's going back to work. So this is from CTV News, but it's from the Canadian press. Canada's economic landscape is set to change dramatically. I don't know, from worse to even worse, because measures on both sides of the border will cause prices to increase, unemployment to rise, and consumers to pull back, said RSM economist Tu Nguyen. Manufacturing, energy, and food sectors will be immediately hit, but no sector will be spared, and businesses will need to cut jobs. And this is in response to Trump's 25% tariffs on most of the Canadian economy.
Well, yeah, obviously. But instead of doing something about it, they're like, every single sector in Canada is going to be negatively impacted by this. Well, that maybe if you guys would have been working in our interest instead of gallivanting around the country in a leadership race, or instead of gallivanting around Europe, shoring up support for the Ukrainian meat grinder, maybe we would be in a better position right now. But no, because we are stuck with this loser liberal government that has no interest in working for us, only for themselves, and only keeping their own power in their evil, traitorous clutches. And this is the outcome that we were going to get when nobody is working on our behalf. Like, no, so not surprised. Are you surprised, Sheila?
No, not at all. Like, why are we doing reports on that the economy is going to contract? We know that. Everybody's been saying that. Wouldn't it be great if our politicians would have acted like it? All they had to do was do the things they needed to do to keep Canadians safe. This should never have even been about the Americans. They just should have done what they needed to do to keep Canadians safe, and the Americans would have said, look, they're doing a decent job up there. Maybe we would have got 10% tariffs across the board. Instead, it's 25.
No, and the reason why we are in such a precarious position is because we spent the last 9 years chasing liberal pipe dreams, carbon taxes, green funds, net zero baloney. This is the reason why we are in such a terrible position is because the Liberals and with the help of their NDP coalition have put us in this position where we are absolutely uncompetitive on the world stage. They could have spent 9 years supporting Canadian industry and supporting Canadian entrepreneurship and the peace and prosperity of our nation. The reason why we are in this terrible, terrible position today is because of their negligence over the last 9 years. Never forget that, Canada.
Yeah. I mean, it's bizarre to me that the Liberals will burn 1 million jobs just to warm their electoral chances, and people in the East are considering rewarding them for it. When you see the poll numbers jump up for Mark Carney, and you're like, what in God's name is wrong with you people?
It truly boggles the mind. It truly boggles the mind. But like all communists, one death is a tragedy, 1 million deaths is a statistic. So to the Liberals, one job is a tragedy, tragedy, and especially if it's a public sector union job, well, then that's a tragedy. But a million jobs, especially out west, well, then that's just a statistic. It is so easily avoidable for them to take accountability for what they've done when it's just a number in the air for them. We are just a number. We are slaves and feudal serfs to the people
Yeah.
of Ottawa, and nothing has shown it more than this. Nothing has shown it more than this.
We've got Trump calling out Canada and other allies for taking advantage of the US. He says he's going to push back with reciprocal tariffs starting April 2nd and pledges to stop illegal fentanyl from killing young Americans. I pulled the fentanyl numbers here. Anyway, we'll talk about it after this clip.
Have growth in the auto industry like nobody's ever seen. Plants are opening up all over the place. Deals are being made. Never seen. That's a combination of the election win and tariffs. It's a beautiful word, isn't it? If you don't make your product in America, however, under the Trump administration, you will pay a tariff, and in some cases, a rather large one. Other countries have used tariffs against us for decades, and now it's our turn to start using them against those other countries. On average, the European Union, China, Brazil, India, Mexico, and Canada, have you heard of them? And countless other nations charge us tremendously higher tariffs than we charge them. It's very unfair. This is happening by friend and foe. This system is not fair to the United States and never was. And so on April 2nd, I wanted to make it April 1st, but I didn't want to be accused of April Fool's Day. That's not, just one day was cost us a lot of money. But we're going to do it in April. I'm a very superstitious person. April 2nd, reciprocal tariffs kick in. And whatever they tariff us, other countries, we will tariff them. That's reciprocal, back and forth. Whatever they tax us, we will tax them. If they do non-monetary tariffs to keep us out of their market, then we will do non-monetary barriers to keep them out of our market. There's a lot of that, too. They don't even allow us in their market. We will take in trillions and trillions of dollars and create jobs like we have never seen before. We have been ripped off for decades by nearly every country on earth, and we will not let that happen any longer. Much has been said over the last 3 months about Mexico and Canada, but we have very large deficits with both of them. But even more importantly, they've allowed fentanyl to come into our country at levels never seen before, killing hundreds of thousands of our citizens and many very young, beautiful people, destroying families. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. They are, in effect, receiving subsidies of hundreds of billions of dollars. We pay subsidies to Canada and to Mexico of hundreds of billions of dollars, and the United States will not be doing that any longer. We're not going to do it any longer.
Okay, well, go ahead.
I do believe we're in the FAFO era of
Yeah.
tariff mania, where Donald Trump says an outrageous thing, and anybody that's read The Art of the Deal would know that this is what he does. So he'll come out and say this on the surface outrageous thing, and then wait for the reaction of the people he's negotiating with. And what
Yep.
he's doing is playing poker and making Canadian premiers show their cards. Well, guess what happens when you show your cards in poker? You lose. And this is exactly where we are in this entire cycle. But I do appreciate what he said about us not upholding our end of the bargain. Even if you think about our NATO commitments,
Yeah.
our 2% GDP going towards NATO defense. American steelworkers in Pennsylvania have to work harder to make up for the shortfall that Canada isn't providing. Um, oil field workers in Texas have to work harder to make up for the shortfall that Canada isn't providing. I don't think that anything he said there was inherently ludicrous, to be completely honest.
Yeah, and you know what? I want to reiterate, I'm anti-tariff. Why? Because tariffs are just government taxes. And as you know, I'm anti-tax. I believe in free trade. I believe in the free market. But how do you get people to do what they need to do? I think that's what Trump is trying to do here. I pulled the numbers because people say, oh, like fentanyl, it's not a big deal. That's what Mark Carney said, right? He said it in all places, Kelowna, where they're just hit by the drug epidemic. 82,000.
He said it's not a challenge. Sorry, go on, Sheila.
No, it's okay. Tell me what Mark Carney said. I forget the exact words.
He said it's a challenge, not a crisis.
Right.
He said it's a crisis next door in America, not a exactly that 50,000 challenges in Canada in the grave because of out of control fentanyl in Canada. But do go on. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, so I pulled the numbers because Trump does talk about this like it is one of the gravest things facing America. And he is absolutely right. 82,000 fentanyl deaths in 2022 alone, approaching 250,000 deaths, I think, since 2018. Like 250,000, just 200 people per day dying in the United States due to fentanyl. To put it in context, 405,000 Americans died in World War II. In 2 years,
Holy
2 years,
God.
unless they curb this, in 2 years, they're going to hit those numbers by adding, 160,000 to the death count, which is already at 250,000. In 2 years, they're going to surpass the American deaths in World War II. Trump is treating this with the absolute urgency it must be treated with. And, if you are somebody whose job it is to protect American lives, wouldn't you do everything you could? That's Trump's approach. And I wish we had politicians who cared about us that way.
Alas, we do not. Alas,
Yeah.
we do not. But if you were a bad actor from a foreign country, say, I don't know, China, right? With a penchant for depopulation and societal destruction, what would be the thing that would get you there the fastest? It would look a hell of a lot like the fentanyl crisis in Canada and the United States. So he's right to fight this tooth and nail and to destroy it from wherever it's coming from and then salt the earth around it. There are few things that have been more destructive. Well, especially with those numbers, Sheila, 250,000 people, that's not nothing. That's 250,000 families that are destroyed. If you think about the families that are impacted by that, that's creeping up on 2 million direct victims of this terrible scourge. And no matter what he has to do to get it done, we support President Trump for taking a really hard stance on this. And you're right, it is a shame that Canada has taken the safe supply approach. The safe supply, like how can they defend it?
Yeah, the safe a safe supply of poison, consumptive poison. But you are right to point out that China is peddling the ingredients of fentanyl and opioids around the world. And we know that the Chinese communists, they see a long game. It's not like an immediate revolution. It's their 100-year plan. So you cause societal destruction and decay. You rewire the brains of young people with TikTok. You surveil young people 20 years in advance of their careers so that you have compromise on them through TikTok because you have access to everything they've ever said and done in all their communications. Let's go back to Trump's tweet there. Justin Trudeau of Canada, I love how he said, in case you didn't know, called me to ask what could be done about tariffs. I told him that many people have died from fentanyl that came through the borders of Canada and Mexico, and nothing has convinced me that it has stopped. He said that it's gotten better, but I said that's not good enough. The call ended in a somewhat friendly manner. He was unable to tell me when the Canadian election is taking place, which made me curious, like, what's going on here? Then I realized he's trying to use this issue to stay in power. Good luck, Justin. Exactly. And I mean, if it's not Justin Trudeau in power, it's one of his cronies.
And there it is.
And Trump's on to him. Why aren't Canadians? I don't know.
That's
right.
right. Trump has got his number. I hope Trump keeps putting the pressure on him, because it's only because of Trump that he resigned in the first place. It's only because of Trump that we're securing our borders. It's only because of Trump that we're tackling fentanyl at all, like started to talk about it, even though 50,000 Canadians are dead in the grave because of it. But I sure hope that he keeps putting the heat on. I mean, nobody deserves it more than Justin Trudeau.
Yeah. And I hope he turns his ire to Mark Carney, and I'm sure he will, in the few short days it will take before we find out who our next prime minister is, our completely unelected prime minister, thanks to a quirk of the Westminster parliamentary system. And we'll get to Jagmeet Singh's comments on that in a second. Danielle Smith, reacting to the U.S. imposing tariffs on Canada, taking a more conciliatory approach, and headed to the courts, where I think this should be battled out. And Danielle Smith, to her credit, has some pretty serious success in the courts against adversaries of the Alberta oil and gas sector. So let's listen to that.
What is your reaction from what you just heard from Trudeau?
So disappointing. We've been doing everything we can, not only our federal government, but all of the subnational governments, to try to avoid this outcome. We, as you heard, we've been working on the border, and we've been putting up drones, putting up helicopters, putting up more personnel. We've been very successful in stopping people from coming across the border from the United States. We've been stopping drugs from coming across the border from the United States. We've brought those numbers down. We thought that was what the U.S. president wanted. And to see this escalation is so disappointing, so damaging, initially to American consumers and American businesses who buy Canadian goods and raw materials. But then now with the counter tariffs, it's also going to be harmful to Canadian consumers. No one wins a tariff war. And so we want to go back to looking at the agreement that we signed, the USMCA. That has served us well for a number of years. And I don't know why the president is behaving this way, because it's illegal. We're going to challenge it. And we would like to get back to negotiating some of the pressure points on that.
Okay, fair enough. You know who she didn't bash in all of that? Was she said she didn't understand why Trump is doing this. I think she does. But she didn't run her mouth about him. And I think a lot of this has to do with Alberta being collateral damage with our 10% tariff on oil and gas, for Donald Trump's visceral dislike of the Liberals who can't shut their mouths about Trump. They call him names. They run him down. They're campaigning against him. Alberta and the West, we're collateral damage in all of this because, as Danielle Smith points out, we were doing what we could.
Oh, hi, it's Ezra Levant here in Toronto with an important message because we need your help. Independent journalism in Canada is under attack. Government censors, big tech deplatformers, and the dying legacy media are all working together to maintain exclusive control on the information you receive. They don't want you to hear other voices like ours, and they really don't want you to be informed and to think for yourself. That's why the work we do here at Rebel News is so important. Our on-the-ground reporting, independent news shows, and special content you won't find anywhere else. It's all designed to give you trustworthy information and alternative viewpoints so you can decide for yourself. We don't get government money, and we are not owned by some big global conglomerate. We're funded by people just like you, so please support independent journalism and help us continue our work by subscribing and becoming a Rebel News Plus member today, right here on the page. Go to rebelnewsplus.com.